Welcome to HR Baddies. This is where HR is smart, strategic, and just the right amount of sassy. I am Katie Garcia, your favorite HR bestie, who's been dropping veteran and military spouse tips for free on LinkedIn over on KDG Support. I am trying to help companies really get that tactical advantage on how they can best support, find, hire, retain all the great things for veteran and military spouse talent. So make sure you head over there and check it out. Today on HR Baddies, we're talking about something that is very, very common in HR, and that's burnout. Why now in October of 2025 is it worse than ever? How do you spot it? And how do you stop yourself from being on fire to keep everybody else warm? Because it's a real thing. It is a real thing that HR struggles with. And a lot of time, I feel like it's aligned that HR burnout is exhaustion, but it's not. It looks a lot like you become apathetic. You're running on autopilot. You're kind of disconnected from the work because it is constantly giving. It's constantly outpouring of yourself for other people and keeping it aligned with the company. So some signs that you're hitting burnout, because I spent some time talking with a lot of great mental health practitioners about this, but signs that anybody, not just HR, is hitting burnout is you're too tired to care. So the company's saying, hey, we're going to send out this engagement survey. And you're like, okay, you're probably pretty close to, if not burnt out. You've stopped celebrating the small wins because you're already on to the next fire. So constantly firefighting. You're great. You're getting into work at the beginning of the day, sometimes even on your way into work. Before your day's even started, your phone is blowing up with one fire after the next, after the next. It is a real, real thing. You're considering yourself to be, I'm fine. So somebody asks you, hey, how's work? You're like, it's fine. Everything's fine. It's all fine. So your out of office personality is no longer what you were. Maybe you used to be effervescent. Maybe you used to really look forward to your bowling league. And now you're just kind of like, man, it's all fine. I'll go and I'll show up and I'll do this. But it's not really truly filling your cup. HR, I think, has different aspects that come into it when you talk about why they're feeling burnt out. And I try to really boil it down to three concise pieces of why HR is uniquely at risk of burnout, especially in today's economic climate for work, for businesses, for where we are in the US. So one is what I kind of alluded to, is that everything's always on fire. So you're constantly dealing with crisis management. There's layoffs, there's policy shifts, there's new trainings, there's DE&I fatigue, there's hybrid chaos, remote work. There's all of these things that you're having to manage, that new guidance is coming down from leadership. New laws are coming down federally. And you're just in the middle kind of trying to figure out, well, how do we balance this all into our teams? Funding got cut for this. Now we got to lay these people off. But now we have, Sally over here and she's got 3 kids at home. So how do we balance all this? Because you know about the people. It's not cutting, let's say, an HR generalist from a position. It's cutting Sally from a position. And that's a very different thing to experience. As HR, we find ourselves a lot of the time as the emotional shock absorber. We are the shock absorber of an organization. So a new law comes out, a new guidance comes out from leadership, a new objective comes out, a new project starts. HR is the first one that needs to kind of be up to speed on the what, the why, the how, the when. All of these things that aren't necessarily all in our purview or even within our control. So as HR, we're a lot of times the first place, one, having to deliver news, good or bad. And then 2, having to help facilitate the pivot into whatever it may be. If people are laid off and the work doesn't lessen, how does that happen? What are we doing to support people that are remaining in the roles, that are now taking on increased workload? Somebody loud quits or quiet quits or whatever. Somebody quits, period. And now the team structure has to change. How is that going to be supported? How is that going to be facilitated? What is that going to look like? The first thing people are going to do is cry about additional responsibility and lack of additional pay. So being able to kind of jump in as that shock absorber, we're supporting leadership, we're supporting the hiring manager, we're supporting the director of whatever department. We are that shock absorber where they're like, this is happening. And we're like, okay, we're going to figure it out. And we do. But we're internalizing a lot of that because it becomes very personal. We know the people, we know the issues, we know the things that are coming. And one, we can't always share them. But two, it's sometimes just not appropriate to keep that into consideration. As HR, we have to remain objective. And that is really hard to do a lot of the times. And that's, I would say, the third thing is holding confidentiality and empathy for every single person except you. So we're talking about how the HR landscape is very different when we talk about burnout. It's really invisible. HR burnout is invisible because we're trained and we have practiced to smile through it. We pretend that we're okay, even though our job description doesn't tell us that we should pretend we're okay. It also doesn't say that we should freak out at everything, but HR kind of has to maintain this stoic persona. So maybe we're laying off one of our friends and it's literally crushing us inside, but we can't let on to that. We also can't tell them beforehand, hey friend, you're getting laid off. So we have to balance all of these different things when it comes to dealing with company, when dealing with culture, with dealing with pivot, dealing with change, all of these things that happen, it all flows through us. So what has really changed? Why is it worse in 2025 than it was in years prior? I think that there's a lot of pressure on modern HR. So the HR workload and expectation has increased, but there really hasn't been support to increase as well. Let's talk just about DE&I. Okay. So there was a large push that recruiting and hiring and internal promotions and all this really needs to be DE&I pressure filled. Okay. It wasn't really positioned in the correct way. It was positioned as like, what box do they check? We should promote them. So HR's emotional labor has been like, well, we're supposed to be biased. We're not supposed to care. We're supposed to find the best candidate or the best person or the best overall fit. And now we're being put into that we're being pushed into different initiatives. I'm not saying DE&I was wrong. Okay. I'm just saying that it was pushed so hard and then all of a sudden unrolled. Okay. So making that emotional pivot is very hard. And HR is the one that had to do that pivot. Then also there's this idea that there's all this data that exists for HR to crunch and figure out. Okay, what is the rate to hire? What is the internal promotion? If somebody changes departments, how long were they tracked in that job versus the new job? There's all of these data pieces that come into it. And then now there's like the promotion of all this HR AI. Okay. So HR has to be both tech savvy and human oriented. Stay human centered over here because you're human resources. But look at this data analytic platform. Look at this dashboard that talks about that we've increased our benefit costs for consumption for healthcare 80%. There's all of this stuff that has to go out there to be data analysts and tech savvy, but also remain human centered and understand that we're trying to do what's best for the company and the employee. Okay. That's another piece of modern HR that wasn't there before. Okay. So pushing KPIs and metrics and time to hire, all these things. In the end, yes, you need to be aware of them for bottom line purposes, but that's not being human centered. That's financial and data. And a lot of that is what is kind of playing into HR being expected to remain human centered and empathetic and understanding, but also tech savvy and financially focused. Also, there's the idea that HR is supposed to do more with less, just like every team. smaller teams, tighter budgets, endless like compliance demands out the wazoo. Things are changing so much at the federal level, at the state level, and then at the company level. So the result of all of this is that HR professionals feel like they're sprinting a marathon every day, that they're holding the company together. They're holding the hiring manager's hand. They're helping to do the layoffs with the general manager. They're doing all of these things to keep it together, and nobody is supporting them. There's no additional resources going into HR. And that, I think, is the summary of why it's worse in 2025 than it's ever been before. It's very hard now for HR to field all of these things, all of these changes, all of these transitions that have been happening in both companies, in our country, in our hiring practices, in our data analytics, all of these different wheelhouses that it never really was before. HR was focused on keeping the company compliant and keeping employees engaged, not even really keeping them engaged, helping facilitate keeping employees engaged. Because again, we can't do it. We can only help promote it and foster it. Okay. So how does HR work through, how do you as an HR practitioner kind of work through setting boundaries? Because that's the only way that it's going to happen. So you can't be strategic if you're constantly accessible. So that would be the first thing, is kind of, what is your role? Is your role tactical or is your role strategic? And if your role is not strategic, you have to kind of cut that part out. If your role is to be tactical, then you need to understand that you are not the strategy leadership person. Maybe eventually you can be, but doing things like blocking your calendar off so that you can get work done and then actually sticking to it is so much harder than it sounds. Being able to set kind of office hours for drop-ins isn't always a realistic thing. Okay. There's some things that we can push off, like, hey, let's revisit this next week, versus like, yeah, I'll do it tonight. Things where you can kind of manage out your workload is a great way that you can set boundaries, but it's not always possible with all the other ways that people say corporately you should set your boundaries. Make yourself inaccessible, block your calendar off, close your door, all of these things, but you can't always do that. I think learning as HR practitioners how we can empathize without internalize is a big shift, because we kind of take everybody else's stuff on as our own. And when we leave, we're thinking about Sally and her 3 kids that got laid off. So how do we empathize with, we have to carry this out because Sally's position has been eliminated, with Sally as a person? What is she going to do now with 3 kids? And then now being laid off in a time where the job market is super weird. It's very competitive. It is very hard to land a job right now. Why in 2025 are we kind of at this pivotal point? A few years ago, we were talking about that there's not enough people to do all the jobs that are posted on the job market. Now it's like made this weird flip where there's so many people and so many talented people on the job market and a lack of positions. So that's not HR's fault. It's just the reality of kind of where we are. How do you care deeply about the people and the company that you work for and not carry everything? Because it's 2 different things. So there's kind of an opportunity for HR to look at how we can help fix company culture, but not be burned out. So how do we say, hey, don't be burned out. Our company culture is really great, while we're operating burned out, totally burned out. It's not that any one thing is going to fix this, and it's not that anything will be fixed overnight. But I think a big piece of what companies need to look at and understand when they're looking at their HR departments, okay, is a lot can be done with better systems. This is something that I love to promote anyway, but kind of when we talk about burnout, a lot of it is because there's paperwork, there's a form, there's a certain protocol that has to be fired, there's a workflow that has to be done. There's all these things that are supposed to happen. And it's always been, let me get another cup of coffee, let me caffeinate a little bit and power through. But if you had a system, a technology system that could help you, wouldn't that be better? If you get a call for somebody got injured at a work site, wouldn't it be great if you could just fire something up on your computer and it literally walked you through everything? Because why is it HR? Why isn't it the general manager or the operations manager or the site manager that's doing that? HR, yes, needs to be notified, but that workflow can be put in through a system. The manager could go do everything, would spit out the phone number that has to be called. It would tell them what they have to do, the report they have to fill out, and then it could route it all over to HR. So when we talk about systems, that's what I'm talking about. Okay. Maybe it's like a reminder system for onboarding and compliance. Hey, 30-day check-in, 60-day check-in, whatever. Did they fill out their I-9s? All of that is usually pretty automated in HRIS or ATS system. But how can that be better utilized by everybody else? Because it's not, a lot of the things that HR takes on isn't necessarily an HR task. There's this whole idea too, when you look at like recruiting. So now I talked about it in the AI podcast that I did, but people are building their resumes with AI, feeding it into some AI system, and then AI is spitting out your 90% match to this job, your 30% match to this job. Add these keywords and you'll be 80% match to this job. So AI is really driving a lot, and it's kind of pushing for chatbots and FAQs and those types of things. And as HR, we're immediately like, oh no, because we're losing that employee engagement. We're losing that candidate experience. But there has to be the balance of, again, you can't be everything to everybody. You can't fix everybody's problems all the time. So a lot of things that come to HR don't need to come to HR. HR's role is to empower, not enable. And this I can't say enough. HR is there to empower, not enable. There is such a lack of training when it comes to middle managers, and I've talked about this in several other podcasts, but push accountability back to the managers. They own their teams. They should be able to have the basic conversation about how they elect their benefits. Maybe not the process or what they should elect, but hey, go to this link and this is where you can elect your benefits. Don't go talk to Katie in HR. Just go do it. The same thing like I was talking about before with if there's a system in place for somebody gets injured at a job site. The first call should not be to HR. First of all, we are not 911. If somebody really truly is injured on a job site, why are you calling HR first? Do what you need to do, get the person help, then fill out the forms and then send it over. Okay. So manager training and empowerment is a big piece of what's missing in 2025. And I've talked about that gap in middle management, the toxic middle manager, and all of that in plenty of my other podcasts. Okay. And I will continue to talk about it because it is a real thing. So looking on how we can kind of simplify, how we can build protocols and practices and systems that will help us not be a burden to us. Maybe initially it'll be a burden because we're going to have to get them set up. We're going to have to ditch the redundant tools and stop triple reporting the same metrics. But what can we help to streamline? Like what's within our purview that we can? Because if it doesn't drive people or performance, it really is just noise. That's what everything's coming down to. Every dashboard, people performance dollars. So realizing that HR burnout is not a personal failure is another big piece. And that's kind of what I'm going to end with. It really is an occupational hazard. HR has become a profession that is built on caring for others. And you can't care for others or drive culture or change if your own tank is empty. So taking your PTO, looking for opportunities for seeking out a mentor or professional development or something like that would be a great place to start. So that's it for this episode. You're not just an HR professional. You're a baddie. You're building a better workplace. So close the laptop, take a nap, and come back again later. Next week, we're going to talk about rebuilding trust after workplace change. So how you can get your people back on board after big shifts, after shakeups or restructures. I'm really excited to see you here. Check out hrbaddies.com always. And again, make sure you're prepping for November by visiting KDG Support on how you can make your company better at veteran hiring and retention.